All right, everybody, welcome to the webinar. We're going to go ahead and get started. Today's topic is Optimize Archicad AI to Model Performance. My name is Tom Simmons. I am the Business Director and BIM Consultant here at Archvista Consulting. We're going to review a number of different topics. We're going to start with using AI to create objects. And I'm going to discuss the types of models you can create using photo to 3D AI model generation. That will include single texture 3D models, component models, and a new option recently released by Meta for selective component models. We'll then focus on how you work with imported models, which will include how you can access more content with increased import formats, how you can review third-party objects before you import them. We'll review the interactive object editor, how you customize materials, and also transforming the imported components. We'll conclude with talking about model management in detail level, including polygon counts, managing the file size, and also using model view options. If there are any questions today, please feel free to enter those into the control panel, and I will review those at the end of the presentation. So let's start with the first topic, which is using AI to create objects. As I mentioned, I'm going to review three different types or processes here for creating the photo to 3D AI models. First is a single texture model. We're going to use Meshy as our example. And the single texture model essentially uses one texture to reflect all the materials within the object. The component model is basically has no textures with it, but allows you to actually create individual components from the photo. And the selective components, which is a new technology, allows you to take any photograph with multiple components in there and furniture and whatever might be in there, and select those pieces of furniture and have it then create the model. So let's start with the single texture model. As I mentioned, this is the most, I didn't mention it, but it is the most popular option. As you can see, there are a lot of AI solutions out there. There's Meshy, which we're going to use today as our example. There's Tripo, 3AI Studio, Hexagon, Convert 3D, and a lot more. The pros with this process is it does generate a 3D model from an image. The materials are automatically applied to the 3D model, and the model can be exported to multiple formats. The cons is the multiple materials are applied as a single texture, so it means it's difficult to edit those textures and materials. The individual components are not editable in Archicad, and it does create messy 2D and 3D graphics. So let's take a look at an example. This is a bar stool from Room and Board. Sylvan is the product line. And we're going to use that as the example to bring into Meshy. Now, notice that this particular bar stool picture has a white background. It's best to get a white background for any furniture or a light background. You want contrast so that the AI can better pick up the object and create the model from that. With that said, you can get this image from anywhere you want. That's one of the nice things about it. If your client brings you examples that they have, you might be able to use those here. If you find examples on the web, you can download those and use them. So it's really flexible in that format. Once you place that into Meshy, so let's click the Generate button, and it generates that particular model, as you can see here. You can also select from different options. You can see the 4 options over there on the right, and you can select one of those to work with. You then download the model, and there's various formats to select from, including FBX and OBJ, which can both be used in Archicad. Once you download those, you bring them into Archicad. Here's the example. So as you can see first, the symbol and the 3D graphics are kind of messy. And so that is one of the disadvantages here, right? And this is using the FBX option. Also, in addition to that, you can see that there's a lot of options to edit this particular model with. The elevation is kind of messy. There's no material options, parameters-wise, to edit anything. It's really very minimal in terms of what we can do. So if we then go into ModelPort, we do have a lot more options. So in ModelPort, I can click the Open 3D Model and then navigate to that particular stool. And I can view that stool here in ModelPort's interface. You can see it's very clean and looks really good. If I select the material, I can actually edit the material here in terms of its lightness or darkness. And I can change the diffuse, the ambient, specular, shyness, transparency, and emission, all to help make the chair look the best that we can possibly get for this piece of furniture. And that is what you can do with a single texture image or single texture model, because you can't change the material. If you want the leather to be fabric, I couldn't do that because it's just one image for the entire model. And that's the way that it works when it converts this into from a photo into a 3D model using AI. Now, once I've got that done, I can basically bring that into Archicad, create the model, and then it becomes a model in Archicad in the object settings. It also creates another advantage to ModelPort is it will automatically generate a 3D preview. Actually, not 3D preview, a object preview. You can see the in the lower left there, the bar stool rendering. That's automatically generated by ModelPort. I don't have to do that after the fact, like you would have to do with the Archicad object if you create that by within Archicad. Here, it automatically creates that for you, and you can always update that as well. Once I'm done, I simply click OK. Place that into our 3D model or the 2D plan as well, and you're ready to go. You'll also see there were several other objects created through the same process. The two lights on either side of the cabinets were also created from photo to 3D, and the sculpture on the counter was created as well. One of our clients, Alejandro, who works for Noblock, told us that ModelPort's been working great. They use it for bringing in AI-generated objects. They are integrating that into their Enscape rendering, and the workflow is pretty seamless. Now, if we're looking at component models, this is a different workflow. So with a component model, the workflow is somewhat similar to bring an image in, right? And they use that image to create the object. But the difference is that rather than you getting a textured model, it gives you components that you then apply materials and textures to. So you can see that the representation of the bar stool below, the purple seat is created individually because it's a different material than the legs are. And so therefore you can work with those differently. The pros of the process is it does generate a 3D model from an image. The components of the model are editable, and the materials can be applied to each component. The cons, the materials are not applied to the components, so that means you do have to go back and do that after the fact. The individual components are not editable in Archicad. That's another disadvantage. And again, it has the same problem that creates messy 2D and 3D graphics. So let's take a look at this. So if this is in FurniMesh, we go to first we import that image into FurniMesh. One thing that's important here, if you do use FurniMesh, there's two ways to create an object. The one that is the default option will create a textured modeled component, like I showed you before. So why would you do it in Meshy if you could do it here? I think Meshy has better quality when the models are created as well as in their preview than Meshy does. So if I was just doing texture models, I might do those in Meshy because I think the quality there is better. If I'm doing component models, I'm going to use FurniMesh because I can take this object, I can bring it, and if I use the advanced generation here, which is a different process than the standard process, then it will generate separate components for me based on the materials. So in this case, the chair has a leather material for the seat. That then generates that as a separate component because it's a different material than the legs are, and that's how it differentiates the different components. Once that's generated, I can then export a GLB, an OBJ, an SKP. For Archicad, you would use, again, an OBJ or SKP option. And again, same process and same problem. Within the settings here, this is the component object. As you can see, it's a very messy 2D and 3D component with the FBX or the SKP, either way. And the materials are not editable, components are not editable, the visibility of the components is not editable, and the symbol and 3D graphics are messy. So it's a lot of issues here still with the components as well. But if we go back to ModelPort, we actually have a lot more options here. It does a much better job at separating out those components and giving us the ability to edit those components within our interface. So you can see here that within ModelPort, we have this chair, and we can now separately edit the seat from the legs. And I can actually select that individually now as a group within there. It also gives us nice clean 2D and 3D graphics. One of the advantages of ModelPort also is that you have the ability to edit based on object or based on material. So if I click the object button where it says select by there, then I can, for example, turn off the legs of the object. As you can see now, the seat there is sitting alone. So if I want to create a different type of legs beneath there, separate from the legs that were created by the AI, then I have the ability to do that. If I click the material option, then I can apply a material to that, and I can edit that material for that particular object or component I've selected. Another advantage here is that I can add a material to it. So for example, when you save or create a object or from a model from FurniMesh as a component, what it will do is it will create one material for the entire for all components. And so when you first get and download that object, that component into ModelPort, it looks like you can't actually edit the material separately, but you can, because ModelPort, unlike Archicad, I can actually create a material and add it to the separate components. So here I can go into ModelPort, I can right-click when the items list and add an item of a material. Once that's added, I can then drag and drop that material onto the chair or assign it to the chair and the seat, and then rename it, call it fabric, whatever I want to do, and now have a texture applied to that. It's really easy. You can then also separate that. You can use the internal materials where you can edit diffuse, ambient, specular, shininess, transparent, emission separately from the Archicad materials. You can also add a texture to an item such as the seat or the legs separate from Archicad. So that means that you could separate out your materials for your furniture from the materials of your project if you don't want those furniture materials to be integrated with your project materials. So it's a nice thing as well. But you do have access to both your internal materials here as well as your Archicad materials within ModelPort. And then finally, let's look to the future a little bit. This is a new option that was recently released by Meta called Meta Playground. And this actually uses or creates selective components. And I kind of term that because that's exactly what it's doing. So the technology is for research, so it's currently for non-commercial and personal use. So the pros, the elements can be individually selected within an image for 3D model generation. It generates a 3D model from selected elements. The materials are automatically applied to the 3D model, and they can be exported to multiple formats. So the cons, materials are not applied to the exported model. So even though they look great within the Meta Playground, they don't actually export to the objects. And currently, you're limited to 2 export formats that are not supported by Archicad. Now, these cons might disappear in the future as they continue to develop it, but currently that's the case. So here's how it works. You create a 3D scene. So you can see that the playground here, there's a variety of options. So you click the create 3D scenes first. That will then allow you to upload an image. Once you've uploaded an image, which could be any image you want to use, you then are going to select what you want to create a model from. So within this image, I'm going to go over and I'm going to select this chair. And after I select the chair, I'm going to click Generate 3D. And it's now going to start the process of generating a 3D AI object. You can see it did a pretty good job and pretty fast. So now if I want to add to this and create more components added to this, I can now add the pillow. So now I can drag my cursor over, click on the pillow, And I want to click on the other edge of the pillow because I didn't get that other edge over there. And now I'm going to generate 3D again. And now it's going to apply the texture of that material of the pillow and the texture of the leather and wood for the chair. And you can see it's done a pretty good job of creating that. So now I can export this. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to export and download these 3D models as a GLB format. It gives you a PLY format, which is a polygon format that is not available in Archicad. The GLB format is also not available in Archicad. That is a binary file format version of the GLTF format, which is available in ModelPort. So what you do is you download the GLB format and you rename that format to .gltf, and then it will give you this little warning, says, do you want to do that? You say, yes, use the .gltf format, and then you can import that into Archicad. So here, we're now going to take that, we're going to import that 3D file, and we're going to select that. I'm going to go ahead and open that up, and it comes right into ModelPort. Now, in ModelPort, you can see this is actually pretty messy as well. But with ModelPort, we have two options that can clean that up. So anytime you have an object come in that's like this, here's how you do that. You go and select the object geometry part of that in the items list. Then you select join polygons and recalculate normals. That will then clean the 3D up, and that will clean the 2D graphics up. And it does the best job it can. Every once in a while, it'll leave some little incidentals in there, as you can kind of see there. But for the most part, it does a really good job at cleaning up that 3D model. You can also create separate components with this meta playground. So here's another example where maybe what we want from this photograph is one of the bar stools, we want a light, and we want the planter. So what we're going to do next is we're going to go in and select the bar stool. We're going to click Generate 3D Model. It's now going to start to generate that just as it did before with the other chair. Once that's done, I'm now going to add an object instead of adding other components to it. So I'm going to click Add Object. Now it's going to create a separate object for the light. So I'm going to click the light. I'm going to generate a 3D model for that. And you can see it's starting to generate that light. And now we have the light. Now I'm going to go back over, and the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select the planter. I'm going to select the planter as well as the flowers above. We want to use that in some of our work, so we're going to go ahead and add that to this. And the only difference between this and the one before is one before created the chair with the pillow as one object, okay? Here, we're creating three separate objects. And so when we do that, we can now download each of those objects in the GLB format, very similar to what we did before with the previous object. Okay, let's next go to working with imported models. And what I want to discuss here first is how you can access more content with increased import formats. And that's exactly what I showed with these AI examples. The graphics, library, transmission format, which you can see there at the bottom list of these formats, are one of the 9 formats that are not available in Archicad. And this is a format that is more and more being used by AI and some of these others as well. And so if you don't have like SKP or OBJ or FBX available, ModelPort can also bring in these GLTF formats as well. And there are other formats too that are available in case you're working with the 3ds Max or 3ds Studio or ABC or Modo or Lightwave. All these formats are available within ModelPort. Also is the import from Archicad. I'm going to show you an example of this option in our ModelPort later, but this allows you to import into ModelPort formats that are not available in ModelPort, such as IFC files, Rhino 3D model, and our Revit objects as well. So if those formats are not available, then what you can do is use, but they're available in Archicad, you can import those in Archicad, place them in your plan, select the object, and then use the import from Archicad object in ModelPort to bring that object into ModelPort. As I mentioned, I'll show you how that works toward the end of the presentation. Now, one of the advantages of ModelPort is, of course, the preview editor. This allows you to quickly bring in objects, review the objects, and it does not take much time to do that. One of the problems with Archicad, as I'll show you in a second, is that you cannot preview objects before you bring them in. So you can, oftentimes, you'll bring in hundreds of objects, maybe you only use 5. And all those objects start to just build up and build up and build up into your embedded library, and it becomes a real problem with trying to clean that up later. With ModelPort, I can import not only this one object, I can import 50 objects, and they would all start listing in my items list there. And it would only take a couple seconds each to bring those in. And then when I review through those, and if I brought in 50, I only need to bring in 5, I simply create and import those 5 in, and those other 45 I can close. And let me show you exactly the difference in speed of these two processes. So if you are using the standard process in Archicad, this is what happens. So first off, I'm going to use this example, which is a SketchUp model from Viking. Viking has a huge library of all their different ranges and stoves and ovens, etc., that you can bring into any program. But they're really big. I think they were created probably as much more detailed models that then got placed as models for people to download and to use. But they're actually not optimized for being used in BIM programs. So this is where ModelPort comes in, and I'll show you that in a second. But this is a big object. It's 131.2 megabytes, and it's 706,385 polygons. And so what you can do with this in Archicad, of course, is you would go to the file menu, you would select merge from file, and you would go and select that object. But there's no preview, so you have no idea how big this model is going to be other than seeing the file size in your system and how long it's going to take once it comes in Archicad. So you do that, it starts to import in. In this case, you place it in the floor plan, and it starts to move around. It takes about 38 seconds to process that model, and you finally get this messy graphic that you're like, not so sure I want that, but let's go ahead and see what that looks like in my object settings. So you select that object, you open it up, and again, it starts to the shading, analytic projections start to happen. But in this case, it takes 6 minutes and 47 seconds just to open it up in the object settings. And while you're sitting there, let's say you get done, then if you want to change the view and see what it looks like in the elevation view, as an example, now you have to wait another 6 minutes and 47 seconds. Or if you want to edit that object, it's not even usable within Archicad. So how do you solve that problem? Well, first off, the total amount of, by the time it came in, you were able to preview and everything was 7 minutes and 25 seconds before it was all done. But let's look at how we can actually solve that problem. So with ModelPort, it's much, much faster because ModelPort doesn't import that into Archicad until you're ready to do that. And then it even imports in Archicad much faster in this workflow. And it has a previewer, so it keeps it in memory before you even get into Archicad. So here's the real time of what happens with that same model in Archicad. So I'm going to click and bring that Viking stove in. It's going to start the process of importing that into ModelPort. And how long does it take? It took 6 seconds on the Apple M3, and it took 17 seconds on the Apple M1. It was more than 95% faster than Archicad. So this is significant. Like I said, if you're bringing in a lot of objects, you're trying to look at a lot of objects from different manufacturers, different sources, it can get overwhelming trying to work with all those different objects, preview those objects, manage those objects. And that's where ModelPort comes in. Once those objects are in Archicad, you can also start to use ModelPort to edit the objects in terms of graphics. So for example, with the stove, I can go and start to edit the stove itself with a different pin color for the outline of it. For the stove and oven, I can change that pin color to a different pin color red. For the knobs, maybe I want that to be a different pin color as well. So again, you start to edit and change each of these pin colors. And then when you update that, it's going to update not only the 3D, but also the 2D, as you can see in the floor plan there. We can, of course, change materials and colors, just like I was showing before. You can add textures directly in the internal editor here, so you don't have to go to Archicad material list to do that. You can keep this separate from material list if you want to, and you can change the materials on the fly very, very quickly. And of course, I can always use the Archicad material list, as this example shows. If I want to change the legs to a different color, I could change those legs to that as well. Now, another important aspect of this is the ability to be able to change the diffuse and the ability to use diffuse, ambient, specular, shininess, etc., to change the way the light hits a material. So the cushions here are a perfect example. The front of those cushions, you can see, are a little bit of a problem. They're washed out, and we need to work on how to change the diffuse, the specular, and the shininess to start to make the material look better. And you can see with a few changes here, all of a sudden the material looks really, really good. And this is where this is real time. You're not having to render to figure out, is this going to look good or not? You can use ModelPort to quickly change these and quickly edit and have this information much faster. And not only can you edit materials, but you can take information forward as well. So whenever you bring an object with ModelPort into Archicad, it works like any other object. I can access the properties, and I can bring those properties into any ModelPort object because the ModelPort object resides in the object settings. So this 4-tap kegerator is one that was used in a restaurant that was created by LS Interior Design. And you can see here where they've created different product information for tear sheets and ModelPort links and contacts, etc. All that information can be linked into your ModelPort objects within the object settings. And then, of course, that can be exported and coordinated with a BIMX model, as you can see on the right here, which is what they did when they export any of their information to a BIMX file. All that information goes with it as well. And as Alejandro was talking about earlier, whether it's Inkscape or in this case Twinmotion, it works great for your objects for ModelPort and any of the third-party programs, as well as the internal renderers in Archicad as well. So let's talk about model management next. With model management, we want to manage the performance of our project files. So in this case, polygon counts can oftentimes reduce and increase performance issues. So what we want to do is reduce the polygon count for a lot of objects when we bring them in. This tree is a perfect example. Any kind of trees, any kind of foliage, any kind of plants can oftentimes have high polygon counts when they're brought into Archicad, particularly if they're a high definition type tree. This one is an HD tree from one of the sources online that creates 3D plants and trees that are really high definition. Problem is that is over 1 million polygon counts. It's 1,122,291 polygons. It's a lot of polygons. And so we really need to reduce this down. So what we're going to do is we're going to go down to, you can see the bottom right corner, there is the detail level. And if we select the detail level and change it from normal to poly reduced, then we can begin to control the polygon count. Now, what I want you to notice is when I select poly reduced, it's automatically going to change that level from the 1 million over 1 million polygons down to 204,000 polygons. That's an 81.76% reduction in polygons just by selecting the poly reduction option to start with. Now, what we can do is we can continue increasing or decreasing the polygon counts with the decimation steps there. If we change the decimation steps to 1, it's going to increase the polygon counts, but also increase the quality of this object. If we change the decimation steps to 3 or higher, it's going to decrease the polygon counts, but it will also decrease the quality. Okay, so it's really a matter of what you want to do and depends on the object. With a high definition object like this, I could probably decrease those decimation steps quite a bit and still have an object that looks good. And again, it depends on, are you going to look at this object up close, or are you going to look at this object from afar? And that may also influence how you change and set up these decimation steps. Also within here, you'll notice that in the items list, this tree is separated into tree trunk and bark and leaf base. If I select the tree trunk and bark, I can actually remove that from the polygon reduction. So the polygon reduction only happens to the leaf base, which is where the highest level of the polygon issues are at. So it gives you that kind of control within the model editor. Now we can also use the same process for reviewing and editing and managing large model scans, such as this one, which is 6.7 million polygons. This is a photogrammetry model of a chapel, and as you can see, has a very high level of detail. And we're actually seeing this more and more with people who need to manage photogrammetry models with an Archicad. This is another tool that allows you to do that. Now let's talk a little bit of how to manage and reduce file sizes of imports. ModelPort, whenever you import in objects from external third-party sources, those files can be quite large. And it really depends. Some will be small, some will be medium, large, but you want to be able to manage those. And it really will impact your model, impact the performance of your project if it becomes bloated. So with ModelPort, we can reduce up to 8 times smaller. And there are 3 save mode options available. There's ModelPort, which is the option that will create that efficient process of reducing the file size. There's GDL, which is Graphsoft standard process of technology, which you can change to, and that will increase that size. And then you can also use GDL and ModelPort together. What that does is allows you to kind of have the benefits of both, the flexibility of the GDL, so you can move the object anywhere you want, and the ModelPort format, which will allow you to bring all the strengths and power of ModelPort with you as well. Now, if you are working with consultants or other team members that do not have ModelPort, you can simply install ModelPort on their machines as the non-licensed viewer-only model, viewer-only program, which is free, and that will allow them to have all the benefits of ModelPort on all their individual computers and simply just can't edit the objects. You can also use, if you don't want to do that, then you can switch the GDL and ModelPort format. That will allow you to then have that flexibility, but it will make the objects larger in file size. So the ideal, this is what most of our clients do, is they use that ModelPort format for the standard format, and then that allows them the most flexibility with being able to access all of the features of ModelPort, and also then be able to have the flexibility of moving anywhere with it by installing the viewer on any computer. So you can see here where we have the original object, which was 2.2 megabytes. The original object was 13.13 megabytes. And when we use the ModelPort format, it reduces that to 2.2 megabytes. CJ Canales, who's the director of architecture at Yup Studio, has been using ModelPort for quite a while. He actually started using ModelPort and switched to the floating license recently, so they've got a lot of people there using it now. But one of the reasons why they use it is exactly what he's saying here. When importing a lot of 3D objects, Archicad files can get bloated. ModelPort gives us the ability to reduce file size and improve our workflow, and that's exactly why we have put this file reduction in here, is to try to help manage that workflow process. All right, let's talk about the controlling the level of detail next. So one of the advantages to ModelPort is the ability to assign a model view option, or a detail level, I should say, to objects when you import them in. So Archicad has the detail level of full, simplified, and schematic, and ModelPort has the same. We mirror that with that same detail level within ModelPort, and then you can assign certain different options to each of those detail levels. And you can also link the ModelPort to Archicad by selecting the by MVO option there below. So how does that work? So first, I'm going to show you an example here that uses uses a Revit object, and then we're going to import that into ModelPort once we've imported it into Archicad. So the first step we'll do, since this is a Revit object, is we're going to import that Revit object using the file, library and objects, and import RFA this is a standard Archicad process. So we'll go ahead and select that option. We're going to select the Revit RFA object here, and we're going to place that into our floor plan. Once that is placed in the floor plan, we're going to go ahead and select that object. And we're going to then select in ModelPort the import from Archicad option. Now, what this allows us to do, as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, is if you have any formats that are not available in Archicad, like IFC, the Revit object, or Rhino, you can use the same import option in Archicad, place it in the floor plan, and use this import from Archicad to bring it into ModelPort. When I select that, it's going to now bring that into ModelPort, and we can now begin to assign the detail level. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and select the middle detail level, which is the simplified option. If you notice, there's two buttons to the right and left. The button to the left of that is the full detail level. The button to the right of that is the lowest detail level. So if I go ahead and select that, I can then begin to select the individual components of this object that I want to assign to that detail level. So I'm going to select those components, and then I'm going to go down to the bottom, and you can see now at the bottom right, there is the hidden option under details level simplified. If I select the hidden option, what I'm doing is I'm assigning those elements I've selected as hidden, and also part of the simplified detail level. So now that those are selected, you can see that it is now assigned those turn off on the simplified detail level. What's also important for you to note is that red bar keeps going up and down. The reason it keeps going up and down is because those elements that are on that simplified detail level are actually pretty high in polygon count. So it's also helping to reduce the polygon count as well as changing, the nature of the view of that information. So now that we've done that, the next step is to create a model view option. So we're going to create two model view options. One for simplified, and that's assigned the simplified miscellaneous setting option there. And the other will be detailed, that's also assigned the detailed or full option there. We'll then create a saved view that has those model view options assigned to it. So we'll create a simplified elevation view, for example, that has the detail level assigned to it, or a simplified option assigned to it. So we'll do it, create that for the elevation view and the 3D view. And then once we've done that, you're going to see that we're going to now have 3D view and an elevation view on the far right here under our navigator. And if I now start to click those two, you can see where I start to turn those off. I can turn the elevation view on, I can turn 3D view on, and I can go back and turn the elevation on and back and forth. And so this gives me the ability now to have saved views with an imported object that now has the ability to have you control the detail level, which is not just what elements are visible, but also will control the performance of that object in terms of the polygon count as well. And then finally, we also updated ModelPort recently to handle more complex models. It can now handle much higher sub-items, which means that it's typically 5 to 10 times faster, and can be as much a really complex project, it can be as 100 times faster. So let's talk next about how to demo and how to get started. Let's look at our license options first. Our standard license is the license for individuals on one computer. So if you just need our ModelPort for your single computer, this would be the license you'd want. If you have two computers, maybe you're using between home and office, a laptop or a desktop computer, and you want to be able to move ModelPort back and forth between those computers, you'd want our switch license. This uses our floating license technology, and it allows you to easily move that license between computers. And our next license option is a floating license. This has the greatest flexibility, allows you to share with different locations and team members, and really allows you to move that license around using that technology. And as I mentioned earlier, there's our viewer license. This is free. It allows you to share this with teams and consultants who do not have a license of ModelPort, and so they can then view any ModelPort objects with the viewer license, and it's free for them to use. If you're ready to purchase or want to view the pricing, simply go to our website there at ModelPort/pricing under archivista.com, and you can also just scan there to get started, and you'll be able to review the pricing on our website. If you are interested in a multi-language version, we are about to release that. We have now completed French, German, Hungarian, Italian, and Portuguese. We're currently working on Spanish and Japanese, and we will have those completed shortly. So yeah, just go to if you want to go to our website there, you can put your information in. We're happy to let you know when that will be ready in the next month or so. And but we're very close to getting that out. If you're ready to take a look at ModelPort and want to download a free trial, go to our website there. You can just, if you don't want to type in all that long URL, simply scan the link there for a free trial, or you can just go to Archicad, archicad.com/ModelPort, and you can just access the free trial there. The free trial does have all the features activated. You can review imports, the interactive preview, you can work with the editing tools, you can try polygon and file size optimization, and you can save objects that you do import. But do note that the free trial does have a 3D watermark on it. All right, I know I covered a lot today, and I want to go ahead and give a little time here for questions. So do feel free to go ahead and enter those questions into the control panel. If you want to, again, purchase or just review ModelPort and find out more information, just go to archivista.com/ModelPort. If you want to get in touch with us, just our email address is info@archivista.com. And of course, our phone number there is 800-522-0554. So I'm going to go ahead and look at our questions here and see what questions we had to start with.